The radio show of Rudy Giuliani that we all definitely knew that he had has been canceled. And it's because of a pretty interesting reason. And he responded in deranged Rudy fashion. So I'll play that for you in just a little bit, quite the meltdown. But first, I want to contextualize this with Dr. Elizabeth Landsverk's thoughts on Rudy Giuliani. She's a dementia and Alzheimer's disease expert, and so just spoke to the cognitive situation with Rudy Giuliani. And she was actually on the David Pacman show, and there specifically to talk about Trump and the cognitive issues that he's having, but brought up proactively Rudy because he's as clear as it gets when it comes to concerning things going on. Coming from a non-doctor, I'll describe it that way, okay? And so here you have this, and this whole interview, super interesting on David's channel. You can check that out. Already a viral segment given how interesting the subject matter is, but this is just about Rudy.
Previous state. So Rudy Giuliani is an easier one, and I'm actually quite worried about him. Here's a man who in the 90s brought down the mob. I mean, you have to be on the top of your game to do that. And then just a year or two ago, he was having a presidential press conference at the Four Seasons landscaping parking lot. I mean, that's concerning. I really get concerned about him with these, legal cases that he is not quite understanding everything that's going on. And when someone doesn't understand the implications of an intervention, in this case, the legal issues, then they don't have capacity for that.
When it comes to go back to something you said about...
Yeah, so we'll stop it there. Again, that full interview is on David Pacman's YouTube channel, and interesting more broadly with the discussions of Trump. But there she phrased it as being concerned about Rudy's issues. And it is, before playing this, just on a human level, sad what has happened with him. But again, as an adult, he should be held accountable for his actions. But he just sort of is unraveling. And it's sort of a public mental breakdown, but all just a breakdown generally, right? Just career breakdown, reputation breakdown. It's all just falling apart, and very quickly because of his loyalty essentially to Donald Trump. The New York Times reports Rudolph W. Giuliani was suspended by WABC radio on Friday, and his daily talk show was abruptly canceled after the station said he violated his policy by trying to discuss discredited claims about the 2020 presidential election. You have the John Katsimatidis, the billionaire Republican businessman who owns the station, said he made the decision after Ms. Giuliani refused to avoid the topic despite repeated warnings. And he said, we're not going to talk about fallacies of the November 2020 election. We warned him once, we warned him twice. And I get a text from him last night, and I get a text from him this morning that he refuses not to talk about it. So he left him no option, and he suspended him. So in response, you have Rudy himself on his show, America's Mayor Live, saying this.
And I'm not even sure I knew what I was going to say yesterday. I just want to be free to tell people the truth. And you want to stop me, don't you? Yeah. The Democrat thing has something to do with it. And the fact that the Bidens are really zeroing in now on interference with the 2024 election. I'm the one who revealed the hard drive. I spoke to the Post today, and
So Mediaite, by the way, put together this compilation that you're watching of different moments from his show. Giuliani goes on a rant about atomic destruction of Biden after WABC cancels his radio show. So that's what we're watching. And while you do, make sure you're subscribed to this YouTube channel by clicking the subscribe button and the like button and the alert bell.
The nice young lady, I said to her, you didn't find the hard drive. I did, and I gave it to you. And I pretty much had to force you to do it, except for Miranda Devine and Levine and a few other people who had the guts to, I mean, you were... And the Wall Street Journal.
So for our podcast listeners, he's making, in these moments of silence, very bizarre faces with his whole body, sort of performatively showing himself to be afraid, mimicking these other people.
The Bidens don't realize who's doing the real, who can really inflict atomic destruction to them. They were going along just fine until Giuliani found the people in Ukraine. He was shaking them down like he's shaking Israel down right now. That's what...
What? Okay, I'll address this after we watch, but Rudy, I can tell you Joe Biden has not thought of you in a very, very, very long time. I don't think you're making him shudder with the threat of atomic destruction of Biden.
Gangsters do. He's a gangster. It's 35 years of taking money. He began as a trailer trash little creep, taking little bits with his scummy little brothers. And now he's a world-class thief. Somehow, strangely, President of the United States, even though his family got $21 to $31 million from our biggest enemy, China. The hard drive. Remember that one, Joe? The one that hopefully will sink your little creep son. But you're the one that really should go down, not your son. You're the reason your son is like that. And we could go into big psychological explanation for it, but if there were a choice of you or your son going to jail, you're the guy that should go to jail. You're such a creepy father, you used him as a bag man with some of the biggest criminals in the world.
Yeah. Oh gosh, this is painful. Who's watching that? Someone, right? That's why he would keep broadcasting. Episode 405, it says. So obviously he's spewing nonsense. And if I were someone, and I'm not saying this in a lighthearted manner, because there's two sides of this. I have critiques for him and very sharp critiques, right? And I do think he should be mocked for his lies and stuff. But then there's also the very real human side of it. People around him need to shut it down. Let's not have you go and do your show, and let's just be a little bit more careful with what we're saying and doing, because he keeps putting himself in more legal jeopardy too. And who even knows what he's ranting about? The hard drive, Hunter Biden's thing, and Biden being afraid of him and how he could inflict atomic destruction onto Biden. And so that's just the rantings of a madman. But then you also have his election stuff, which has led to him being broke because he's been sued, rightfully so, for attempting to ruin the lives of election workers like Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss, not to mention being sued by election machine companies, not to mention being indicted for participating in an attempt to block the peaceful transfer of power. So as he goes on and on and on, ranting about how President Joe Biden's the criminal, despite there being no evidence, and Republicans investigating the very ridiculous claims he's making there and failing over and over and over again, to the point where the leader of this investigation, James Comer, is saying that he wants Jesus to come down to save him so he can get out of this investigation. And still, Rudy Giuliani is pushing that to justify calling Biden a criminal when he's the one who's been indicted. Giuliani has. And then he pretends like Biden is this huge threat to what we hold near and dear. But again, he was indicted for participating in this unprecedented attempt to overthrow a lawful election and keep the sitting president in power despite the election result. And so a lot of projection going on there, and quite the rant to go on after being let go from this radio station because of his inability to stop lying about the election. And again, this is a conservative billionaire who made the decision. So it's not some lib because we don't want the truth to come out. It's every person who possibly could has investigated these claims he makes, and they just don't hold up to any scrutiny, but he keeps pushing them. And so then, to the doctor's earlier point, maybe part of what we're seeing in the unraveling is that he's genuinely not well, and that could be it. But really concerning stuff there. Let me know what you thought of all that in the comments.